Hi guys, I will be paraphrasing Chapter 8 titled Avoidance. Sidman opens up by saying that we try to escape every time punishment is delivered, despite the use of positive reinforcers. He questions that we may cope better if we can avoid the shocks or punishment altogether instead of maintaining the same contingency of punishment followed by escape. Kids usually don't wait for their parents to punish them or put them in timeout. So instead, they hide or make excuses for their behavior. Similarly, not many drivers wait until their tank is empty to fill up on gas. We build barriers in order to prevent flooding and stock up food so we don't go hungry. A lot of our behavior follows a prevention strategy instead of terminating the shocks in life. The difference between escape and avoidance is that a bad event has to happen for escape to occur, and avoidance prevents the bad event from occurring. Sidman states that avoidance becomes another form of negative reinforcement. Coercion also encourages escape and avoidance behavior. Due to experimental research, it has been proven successfully that avoiding potential shocks acts as a secondary consequence of escaping from shocks. Therefore, avoidance is actually escape behavior. The laboratory setting helps delineate between avoidance, escape, and punishment in order to understand coercion. In one experiment, a rat is placed in a chamber with a dim light and a lever. The dim light signifies a precursor of a shock. If the light stays on for 5 minutes, then the rat will be shocked. However, if the rat presses the lever, which turns off the light, then the rat will not be shocked. The cycle then repeats itself. Avoidance is generalized across different species, including in humans. In the natural environment, punishment is usually signaled, and we receive shocks from others regularly. People who use punishment become conditioned punishers, and those same people will also become conditioned warning signs. In other words, they will start avoiding those people who punish. Avoidance is acted upon whenever a bad event occurs. However, it is impossible to determine the relationship between future non-occurrences of shocks and the present shocks. We cannot act upon potential future warning signs in order to prevent those shocks from happening currently. Most of what we have already learned to escape or avoid from lies in our past, histories of reinforcement, or the shocks we have already experienced. The other cause of avoidance lies in the present. Based on the number of shocks we've received in the past, we press a lever so that we can receive fewer shocks now. Those reductions of shocks become reinforcers that will augment any actions that will reduce the shocks. Sidman emphasizes that the cause of any behavior is originated in the past and present positive or negative reinforcement contingencies. Avoidance occurs when people see a decrease in the number of shocks they encounter now. Since avoidance presents itself from coercion, it may be difficult to identify because the aftermath of it is invisible to us. If a child does not go to school when he leaves the house, it may be possible that he is avoiding the bullying from his peers. This is often unseen and hard to detect, because it involves comparison with past bullying events. Sidman lists the steps to coercion-induced avoidance, whether it is from ourselves or others. The 2 steps include recognizing the target behavior as avoidance and examining the past and present contingencies that are maintaining the behavior. The difficulties in examining these contingencies along with the future prospect of avoidance results in some myths about the causes of avoidance. Myth number 1 is seeing expectancies as causes. It is an improvement in the world of behavior analysis when we see causes from past and present conditions instead of future events or expectancies. The avoidance of shock can be explained from past and current negative reinforcement contingencies, but it serves as an escape from expecting shock. Sidman states that expectancies are extra baggage to carry, so instead we should reduce the kid's expectation of the bullying by lessening the actual bullying in order to achieve the goal of the expectancy. By doing this, it will reduce the kid's expectations and his avoidance of going to school. Both variables are independent of each other and are not causally related. We can measure shock expectancy by taking data on the probability of shocks and expectancy reduction by taking data on the decreased number of shocks administered. The way to reduce a child's anticipations of distress in the doctor's office is to have him or her visit without the pain or distress. Myth number 2 is fear and anxiety as causes. Fear and anxiety are often used by psychologists and psychiatrists as explanations for causes of avoidance. One major reason is the immediacy and intensity of those internal states that follows our external actions. When we experience these internal feelings, we abandon the external factors, that is, shock, that trigger those feelings. Because of that, we explain that our feelings are the source of avoidance. There are many strong positive and negative reinforcers that stimulate our internal processes, such as food, pain, heat, cold, and sex. Different parts of our body systems react a certain way if any of those reinforcers stop occurring. Signals for strong positive and negative reinforcers also has an effect on our internal processes. Similar to expectancy, the internal states of fear and anxiety do not give an account for how coercion by punishment and negative reinforcement provokes avoidance. Feelings and their reduction do not provide sufficient information to explain avoidance because they are caused by the same shocks and shock reduction that formed avoidance. In order to change the avoidance behavior, we have to identify the contingencies that maintain it. Changing the contingencies will also change the act of avoidance and the fears and anxieties that come with it. Sidman provides the example of a depressed person who may suffer in 2 ways: being stagnant and avoiding any involvement in family relationships or personal conduct, and second, they are in a perpetual cycle of fear and anxiety and attribute their depression to their feelings. Due to the intense internal battle, many pharmaceutical companies promote the use of antidepressant drugs to alleviate the feelings of depression. Although these drugs may help temporarily in lessening the signs of anxiety or depression, it doesn't always revitalize the individual back to an active, purpose-driven life. Instead of catering to the individual and their feelings, the family might have done something more proactive by encouraging her to get out of her sedentary lifestyle, and the therapist could have identified the shocks and reinforcers that are maintaining her behavior to get the individual up and going. Up to this point, we have seen how avoidance can be bad, but it can also be useful. Children learn to avoid touching hot stoves, walking on the sidewalk instead of in the street, and to avoid strangers. The same can be said for anxiety in that it can be useful. We learn useful avoidance through verbal rules provided by parents, teachers, or peers. A child may stay on the sidewalk so that they can avoid being reprimanded by their parents. Coercion side effects that involves avoidance are often uncalled for and impractical. Using fear and anxiety as the causes of avoidance detracts the therapist's attention from the observable variables that causes the internal state of affairs. Another laboratory experiment was conducted to see the subtle causes of avoidance and apply the analysis of coercion and the side effects to a broader perspective. This experiment deals with unsignaled shocks. Sometimes we are not warned when we are going to be punished, but we can still function with it. In this instance, the laboratory rat gets shocked every 20 seconds without a signal. However, the rat can still use a lever to prevent shocks from delivering. When the rat presses the lever, the shock will be postponed. By pressing the lever often, the rat can get away from being shocked at all. When applied to humans, the rigid behavior of pressing a lever for no obvious reason may seem strange. The lack of contact with reality is characteristic of avoidance behavior because you don't see the consequence of someone's avoidance. When a signal is present, you can see why they press a lever, but when a signal is not present, there is no apparent cause for pressing the lever. If coercion is not revealed in the laboratory setting, then it will most likely go unrecognized in the real world. Avoidance behavior then becomes unexplainable. So my question to you guys is, have you ever experienced avoidance as a means to escape from a certain event or person? Was there a precursor that signaled your avoidance, or was it unsignals? Thanks.